The Happy Mondays.
The Buzzcocks and the Fours.
The Shack.
Smiths.
Happy Mondays.
Has to be Joy Division.
The Northwest has produced so many great legendary bands and has been responsible for so many sorts of new waves of music, you know, going right back to the 60s with, you know, the Beatles.
There's just so much passion for music in this city. It just constantly puts out good quality music. I was a massive fan of Punk Generation, the Buzzcocks, the Four, people like the Happy Mondays. I loved the Stone Roses, and people like James, Charlatans, Paris Angels, World of Twist, New Order. We just never made bad bands in this city. Our bands are always, without exception, they're incredible.
Just people had records, like the mates had records and that I'd never heard before. The Beatles and the Happy Mondays and like the likes of the Fall and all that. I love all that. The Smiths, everyone says it's miserable, but it's kind of not miserable. It's just joking about the situation.
But we're thinking back to Manchester era and the baggy sort of phenomenon. It was a beautiful thing to be part of. Even as, if I can detach myself a bit from being that guy out in spirals, and even as a record buyer and a consumer, it was a beautiful thing to be part of, you know what I mean?
I think it was a time when you were inspired by the people who were close to you. So I think the people I was working with in Liverpool and the musicians and Probe all inspired me, you know.
One sort of the bands of the mid-80s, the likes of the Bunnymen and the Teardrop Explodes, and all of those bands had sort of slowed down, and Liverpool needed somebody to stand up to what was happening in Manchester and not let Tony Wilson and Factory Records have all their own way and dominate the Northwest music scene. And Cream filled that gap and took over from there. The great thing about Cream was it was a nightclub. It wasn't like your average nightclub that opened every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It opened every Saturday night, and every Saturday night was an event. The loyal fans that came here week in, week out, they owned it. They really genuinely did.
I think Cream, being at the forefront all the time and being like such a big rave scene going down in Liverpool, I think that made a lot of kids who were into heavy metal or whatever, or into rock music, want to make guitar music.
You know, now there seems to be places where bands can develop and play and stuff, you know. This is a gig where we're sitting in Corova, and there's a lot of places just in this little area around Bowl Street.
Just down the corner is Zanzibar. We started there. That was the best place to play. It always had the best sound. You know, you can do things in there that you wouldn't be able to do in other venues.
You know, we're creating more bands now than we ever did. The scene at the moment for live music is incredible. The Roadhouse, that's the venue that's a great place to watch new bands. Night and Day Cafe on Oldham Street, brilliant. And then we've got the big Superdome places like the MEN Arena. The G-Mex is a great historical venue. Snow Patrol played recently, Morrissey played recently.
There is definitely a sort of creative force that exists in the northwest of England, which I think a lot of people find hard to sort of compete with, and I think that's why the Northwest has always been perceived as being a creative hotbed.
I just felt like I've probably written the best songs I've written while I've been in Liverpool. So for me personally, when I'm in Liverpool, my head gets filled with music.
What's great in the Northwest is great musically. One city takes over for a bit and then another city fights back, and just always this constant imbalance of who's producing the best bands.
100 years from now we will still be making the best music in the world. We have created class records for decades now, you know.